Wait a second. This isn't your grandma's cancer show.
Not your grandma's cancer show.
Hi, I'm Tatum Durock, and this is Not Your Grandma's Cancer Show. And today's episode could be called Not Your Granddad's Cancer Show, because today we're talking about men and cancer. And luckily, I have three great guys to fill me in on this. They're in their 20s, 30s and 40s, and they'll be sharing some of the obstacles, some of the expectations and challenges that come along with being a man with cancer. We'll chat to Dan, a performer in his 30s, who was working out with a personal trainer when he discovered what he thought was a new muscle, but turned out to be a rare sarcoma. And we'll hear from Neil, who was living in London in his early 20s and when he was diagnosed with a brain tumour. And right now beside me, I have Mike. Hi, Mike.
Hello, Tatum.
And you were a Marine and then in the police force.
That's right, yes. Yes, I was, yes.
And tell me, what was going on in your life when you were diagnosed?
Normal family life, really. He's married, 2 young children. Both of us were working full-time, children going to school. But, you know, both of our careers were heading in the direction that we wanted them to. And we were very happy with, you know, our life in Dorset, you know. And so getting diagnosed at that point was quite a bit of a shock because you just don't really expect it to happen.
No. And how did you find out?
Well, it was more a case of I had a lower back pain for a long period of time, and initially I wasn't sure if it was just a back injury or if it was I pulled a muscle or something, you know, or something else, a trapped nerve or something, and so I just didn't really give it a huge amount of thought. Started to take some painkillers just to get me through and take the edge off of it, and then just carried on with work as normal. Mm-hmm. But then it didn't really go away, and the pain started to get worse and worse, and my painkiller intake of was just, you know, paracetamol and ibuprofen started to increase, and but you know, I didn't want to come across at work as, you know, playing the bad back card, you know, and because you know, in some roles, you know, some people can take a lot of time off work, and you know, just through back pain, and I had quite a good reputation, and I wanted to continue working. I didn't want to be you know, taking any time off work. I thought I could manage it myself, and with painkillers and that, you know, through taking it a bit easier, it would sort itself out in the end. But it didn't, and I phoned the GP, and I spoke with the GP over the phone, followed the normal GP's advice of no heavy lifting, and but keep moving. And so I continued to do that. And then I continued to take more and more painkillers. And this went on for about 6 months. I developed a limp. I had a good routine with my painkillers. I get to work in the morning and I'd take 4 or 5 paracetamols in one go, and that would see me through for most of the working day. And then before I go home, I'd take some more, and then I'd take some more later in the evening. So it was quite an overdose, really. And that went on for weeks. I was saying, and my wife was like, "What's going on? You know, you've got to go to the doctor. This is insane." And it started from there.
And when you were going through treatment, so it sounds like you're someone that sort of powers through things, would you say?
Well, yeah.
Do you think that's a bit of your training as well?
Well, yeah, because the mentality when you're a soldier, and certainly in the Marines, you know, you have a bit of a, you know, take 2 Brufen and carry on, you know. So, you know, being on the sick or anything, you know, like that was seen as negative. Right. So you always wanted to be, you know, not complaining about being in pain, not complaining about, you know, having a cold or any ailments or anything. You suck it up and crack on, you know. Mm-hmm. And so that mentality had stayed with me right up to this day, I think.
And can you tell us what you were diagnosed with?
So I was diagnosed with a bone marrow cancer called myeloma. The seat of it was a growth in my sacrum, which is in the base of my spine. It's like a tumour, but it's not a tumour. It grows out of the bone from the bone marrow. And that was pretty much the seat of the cancer. I had some other areas in my hips as well where the cancer was starting to grow. And that was the pressure, the size of that growth was putting pressure on all my nerves around my pelvis, and that's what was causing the lack of mobility and the pain. Mm-hmm. And certainly by the time I was diagnosed, which was in July, and the pain had really kind of started late January, early February that year. I was only really able to walk probably from the front door to the car and the driveway without painkillers. So it was quite debilitating at the time.
Yeah. And how did you approach treatment? Did you follow through with that kind of powering through, looking at kind of the next goalpost? Like, how did...
Yeah, I didn't know any different, really. Once I got over the grief of the diagnosis, myeloma is incurable. So, when everybody's first diagnosed with the cancer, they go through. I certainly did a period of grief, of trying to take in, what's happened and what's going to happen in the future, or what may or may not happen in the future. But then treatment starts quite quickly, and then you have these short-term goals to aim for. For me, it was about 6 months of chemotherapy. And then after that stage, more tests. And then that would give you an indication of how the chemotherapy would work. And then after that, it was radiotherapy. That would give you an indication from tests after that. And then onto a stem cell transplant. So you had these short-term goals to aim for. And when you achieved those goals, it was like great, happy days. Everything's going on as it should do. And you're able to move on to the next stage. And that's how I coped with it for that year.
And what happened when you got to the end of the active part of your treatment?
Well, it was pretty much almost a year, to the month really. Had my stem cell transplant, and then you have a period of 100 days where you have no treatment. It gives your body the time, your immune system to come back up to strength. And then you have tests at the end of the 100 days, which gives you an indication of how well the stem cell transplant has worked. And for me, it put me into a very good remission. Not a full remission, but a very good remission. Mm-hmm. So my cancer level was just less than 1. And so you're discharged then from the medical side of things. Obviously, they have a lot more poorly people to carry on with, so once you're finished, you're then kind of left to your own devices, really. And for me, those kind of short-term goals, that sort of regular interaction with the hospital, which was a bit of a source of reassurance and someone to lean on if you weren't too sure, had kind of gone. Although they still said, if there's any problems, you can give us a ring. But there they would, obviously, I'd finished my treatment and, they needed to focus on people that were still in their treatment. So you do feel quite alone. Mm-hmm. And then you start to wonder, well, what's going to happen in the future? And for me, I went back to work quite quickly within that 100 days period, which in hindsight was a bad mistake because I just made myself ill. I was susceptible to infection, and I was picking up those sorts of things quite regularly. And it was in that period that my work mojo, if you like, had gone, just disappeared, and I couldn't understand why. When I was at work, I just felt like I was wasting what time I had, being well before I relapse, and whereas prior to diagnosis, I would quite happily work for as long as I needed to, but and I was in quite a responsible position. That work mojo, that had just gone, and I couldn't really understand why, and I was just really going through the motions, really, and I started to struggle with mood swings, and I do and say things which were completely out of character.
So did you feel like your personality was changing?
Oh, everything had changed. I felt like everything had changed, You like thrown this curveball. You want to get back to work, you want to get back to normal, how things were pre-diagnosis, and get back on the horse, so to speak. And guys at work like, "Oh, Mike, you're looking really good. Glad to have you back. Great stuff." And on the face of it, I was like, "Yeah, it's great to be back. I'm feeling fine." But it was like a Russian doll. I had a layer of that for work colleagues, the next layer for my friends, and the next layer for some family. And really, the person who saw the real me, if you like, was my wife Jo. Which you couldn't hide from, and because she's with me all the time, and my children, of course. But I could quite happily put on a facade at work, and come across as everything's all fine. But I started to wonder, why I wasn't feeling the same as I used to.
And with that kind of range of emotions, like, how would you have described them at the time? Was it like frustration or anger, or like how was it coming out, or irrationality, or like what?
It was a mixture of, at that stage, in the early stage, it was a mixture of everything, because it was almost like the isolation had started at this point. Everybody's like, "Oh, well, you're fine now, aren't you? So you're in remission, that's it, all good, crack on." But in reality, I knew that I had incurable cancer, and that I was going to be having to step up to the plate again to go through a relapse and another course of chemotherapy. So that was in that mindset. I was still in that fight mode, and I couldn't feel that I could relax and believe that I was in a remission that was potentially to hold for a good period of time. I think my family did notice some change within me and my personality, but you don't recognise it yourself, because it happens quite slowly. I'd never felt that way before. I'd always been strong character, happy to be the first in through the door, dealing with, situations and scenes, through the years of being a police officer, and I'd never struggled with any of that. But then to be back at work and to start to feel differently, experiencing things which, well, I just didn't even know what to call them. We mentioned guilt and anger. When I ended up getting some counselling, it was that counselling process which helped me identify what I was feeling. And yes, I thought I was feeling intense guilt about a number of things, but it wasn't. It was actually intense anger. And that manifested itself in my short-temperedness, my mood swings, my lack of empathy, being confrontational in situations where you would never normally be confrontational. And I was still a serving police officer at this point as well, don't forget. So a bit of road rage would come out. I'd never in a million years would be someone who'd engage in road rage. But I was. If someone flashed me, on the road, I was like, "Oh, screw you," and I never would have done that.
Right. Things
like that. And so my personality changed completely, and it wasn't good, and not in a good way neither.
And when you caught yourself in that moment of experiencing road rage, did you sort of say to yourself, "Oh shit, like what's going on here?" Or were you so in it that it took someone else to sort of point it out to you? Or
it was after those individual events that I was like, what on earth did I do that for?
Yeah.
I would never normally do that. I almost couldn't stop myself from doing it at the time. I was in hospital after clinic, and I was queuing to use the gents' toilet, and this old gentleman he come in and pushed in and went and used the toilet before me, clearly jumping the queue. And when he came out, I was like, "That's okay, mate. We just stood here for no reason at all." I never would have said that to an elderly gentleman. Crikey, he was probably dying for the toilet and probably wasn't aware, poorly, just come out of treatment and not really aware that there was a queue. And yet I said something, awful like that. I never would have said anything like that. But at the time, you can't stop yourself.
Right. So it's
just come out.
It's what you mentioned before, that fight or flight. Like you were in fight.
Constantly.
Yeah.
You're constantly in that level of, whatever life throws at me, whatever's going to happen, I'm ready for it.
So I'm wondering, and tell me what you think of this. If anger is quite motivating, and I'm talking in generalizations. Anger seems to be an emotion that men it's accepted that men experience.
Yeah.
So that, when feeling maybe other things like lost or scared or confused, that those things might turn into anger. Would you say that might be?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I think with the whole anger thing, you don't want to admit the weaker emotions. You don't want to admit that you're feeling vulnerable. You don't want to admit that you're feeling scared about the future. You don't want to admit to anybody else, let alone, yourself, that, that you're struggling. And so, with anger, that was, it was like a natural manifestation, if you like, but everything that came with anger puts you into that frame of mind where you're ready. You have that kind of release of chemicals, almost like adrenaline. And you're constantly in this state. Did
you also have other symptoms of sort of, because when you're geared up for a fight, any little thing can set you off. Were there any other sort of triggers of sounds or that?
Yeah, it was, as time went on, looking back, because like I say, at the time you don't really realise that, because it's happening over a slow period of time. Loud bangs, dropping cutlery into the dishwasher, when you're not expecting it, and that can send you through the roof. You're there ready. Bosh! Oh, what was that? And you're always like hyper sensitive, constantly.
Like a hypervigilance.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, where normally, dropping crockery or something like that, you wouldn't bat an eyelid, but it would make you jump, and you would almost be there, stood up, ready to go, and that would then make you cross, and I would say, "Oh, for goodness sake, what do you do that for?" And I would say, whoever drops it, being the children, my wife, and then I'd flash, and I would and I would get cross, and I would shout or say something, which afterwards I would regret, and so it played out in other ways. I was, I still do to a certain extent, but I was having reoccurring nightmares. It was nothing to do with cancer and nothing to do with anything I'd experienced in the past, but it was the same dream, which where I was stuck and I couldn't get out of it. Effectively, I was back in the Marines as a 40-year-old man with a bunch of 20-year-olds, and I was always at the back. I couldn't get out. I was stuck in this room or this exercise or this whatever, and I just couldn't get out. And that, I don't get so many as now, but at that period it was happening a lot. And obviously my wife would know during the night, because I would shout every now and then, in the middle of my sleep, and so there was a lot of things that were going on. And
from your training in the Marines, did you know to recognise signs of PTSD? Was that part of?
No, nothing.
No.
Nothing at all.
And?
Nor the police either.
Really?
No.
And so when did you become aware that PTSD can be triggered by
pretty much when my marriage was on the brink of collapse. Because when you're discharged from the NHS medical side of things, you're not really given, or I wasn't given a debrief, and so to speak, of what had happened and all the things we've gone through, and it wasn't really given a huge amount of, well, if this happens, or if you feel this way, or if you notice this kind of, tick list of things, then you need to come back to us, you need to speak to somebody, because that's not quite right. Didn't really have that at all. But over a period of probably over 18 months, really nearly 2 years, things started to almost compound it. I was medically retired out of the police, out of my career. So, that was another negative thing. Cancer, the gift that keeps on giving, or career's gone. What am I going to do now? So I was at home a lot. My wife was still working full time, and I was struggling with the transition of losing my career, and now I was thinking, well, I'm losing my future. I'm not going to have or do the things that a father would normally do. I'm not going to have the long retirement with my wife that that I thought I was going to have, and somebody else would have that experience, and somebody else would be walking my daughter down the aisle, and so all these things were just constantly chipping away in the back of my mind, and so it turned me into this person, and Joe and the family had to live with that every day. And although I was trying within myself to stop myself from being ratty and short-tempered, and from being the bad guy, people, your partners, they can only take so much when they're living with someone with depression like that. Joe was like, is this the life for me? Is this what I've got for the next God knows how many years, living with this ogre in the house? The children had a similar opinion, because I would over chastise them if they would drop something. I would shout, what would you do that for? Sit round, and you would make mountains out of molehills, things which as a parent you would just being kids, stuff that you would just let go straight over your head. But at that time, they just manifested themselves into much more important things, I suppose. My wife and I argued one weekend. It was Father's Day weekend, actually, and I'd said some pretty hurtful things. And off the back of that argument, I felt that I had to leave. I'd become pretty toxic within the family. The family home. It wasn't a family home. It was not a nice place for Joe or the children to live, and I felt that I had to leave and give them some breathing space, and I checked into a cheap hotel in Southampton for the weekend, wondering how on earth had it come to this. A couple of years previous, we were living normal lives, good careers, lovely family life, great wider family, and there I was, sat in this cheap hotel, wondering how did it all get flushed down the toilet.
And when you were there, is that when you thought, okay, like I need some
that was the turning
guidance,
point.
There's some support?
That was it, yeah. Well, there was for me, it couldn't have got any worse.
Yeah.
I was losing my wife, losing my family, losing my home, losing everything, and that was the point where I thought, well, I've got to admit that, I'm a lot responsible for this, and I've got issues which I need to do something about. It's not going to sort itself out. I can't just take two Brufen and crack on.
Right.
I've got to do something about it. And
so all your training, everything that you had previously done to approach hurdles, just weren't going to work
anymore. Wasn't working at that stage, no, for that. But then I almost took ownership of my own health.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the only way that I'm going to beat this is to take ownership of it myself. And I didn't believe that someone was going to come along give me a magic pill and say you're fixed. So I thought, I need to do something. And so, the following Monday, straight to the GP, explained what had happened, and I started a course of antidepressant medication, depression medication, which I had no problem with, because it was the right medication for me, but it took away that base layer of stress. So, when you're living in a constant, layer of stress, like your stress bucket is like 4/5 full up, and it just takes one little thing to sort of overflow it and kind of explode, if you like. So, but for me, the medication lowered that, and that gave me then the ability to focus on the next stage, which was counselling. I just straight off booked 10 sessions of counselling privately. I saw it as an investment in my long-term health, so it wasn't cheap, but then in hindsight it was worth every penny. I increased my exercise level, because it's recognised that exercise is good to help with depression and stress and anxiety. And then it was trying to convince my wife that it was that the real me was still there, and that I was ill, but the real Mike was still here. The last 18 months had been someone else. I'd been taken over by cancer and depression, and that the real Mike was still there, and that effectively begged to come back into the family home and prove that I could rebuild my life and rebuild my position within the family, and be the father that I wanted to be. And together with that, I found Shine, which is the charity I volunteer a lot for, and started to engage with them. And I just hit it with everything I could think of, everything I could do all at once, to get a grip of my recovery, so to speak. I don't know, recovery, I don't really like that word, but it's a fair word. Engaging with people that understood the isolation you feel, and having gone through the same things, and just then really slowly understanding what you are feeling and why you are feeling in that way, and that process in itself gave lots of little rewards, which then on their own probably weren't that great, but because they were all together, the kind of level of reward that I was getting was much bigger, much more intense, if you like. I was getting good results from working and being involved in the charity. I did a course at the school to become a better parent. I didn't want to be the sergeant major father. I wanted to be, the father that, gets respect out of love and not out of fear, because I was all about, if you do this wrong, you can stand by, sort of, disciplinarian. I didn't want to be that person. And so I would engage and say yes to anything which I thought was beneficial. And I don't know if you ever read the Yes book. It's a book now. It's about a guy who says yes to everything, and his life changed. And so I went through a period of, if I didn't have any particular reason to say no, then I would say yes. And so when I engaged with Shine, it was like, oh, why don't you come along for dinner? Yeah, okay. Why don't you come along for, yeah, okay. Would you like to do? Well, yeah, I'll do that. I've got no reason to say no. So, and all those things together over about, 6 months really started to have a really positive effect.
Yeah, and it sounds like, to go through that, it takes a lot of strength to be able to acknowledge the emotions that you have, and particularly the ones that led you to being in that hotel and that moment, to be able to kind of talk about an incredible amount of inner strength to want to face those things and look at them and reach out to other people that can understand, or with your therapist, guide.
Yeah, I think I didn't get to that situation. I wish things had progressed quicker. I'd sought help earlier, but for whatever reason, I think for me and my kind of mentality, I had to probably hit rock bottom before I was ready to accept that I needed some help and, to rebuild again. I'm a strong believer now in those therapies being a preventative measure.
Right.
To be engaged with much earlier on in the cancer process, right from diagnosis, because just the diagnosis itself is just life-changing and causes such a 90-degree turn in your life. So that's for me where I try to advocate other men especially not to see counselling as for mental health cases, not to see therapies of whatever description as something in response to a crisis.
Right.
Surely it's got to be better not to get into crisis in the first place, and to just have those support structures much earlier on in the treatment process, and then to continue on so that they just become normal and there's no stigma of, he's seeing counselling, he must be a bit mental,
It's
so
really taking that apart and making it just like another appointment that you have, because
Exactly.
you already have a billion appointments.
Just another thing which you need to get on with as part of your treatment program. Yeah, as opposed to there's something wrong with you. You need to you're a bit broken and we need to fix you with something. So then, because that just fuels the stigma of men seeking counselling or men with mental health issues. Because you don't want your mates in the pub to think that you are, want of a better phrase for a mental head case, because, and that's so derogatory. Everybody has issues, but in the sort of kind of masculine world, if you like, that's how a lot of people think, and you don't want people to think of you. I didn't want people to think of me as, someone who's weak. I wanted to think of me of who I was, Mike, I was strong, and, I would step up to the plate when I needed to, I didn't want people to see me as struggling with mental health issues. So anything I can do to beat that stigma, that mental health issues is not a negative thing, and that it is, something to just to manage like you would any other medical issue.
Right.
Anything I can do to sort of break those stigmas, then it's got to be a good thing for me.
Thank you. And a good thing for everyone that comes across. And we're going to hear from Dan and Neil, and and I want to run by them what they think of putting counselling or, a therapy into place, if that would have made a difference with them. Thank you again.
No worries. Thank you for having me along.
Dan and Neil, thank you for coming in, and you were just listening to Mike.
Yes, brilliant. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that Mike was saying that I could relate to as well, which is really interesting to sort of hear how Mike's gone through everything and what he's doing now as well to sort of help that stigma as well.
Yeah. And so tell me what was going on with you in your life when you were diagnosed.
Well, when I was diagnosed, I was working a lot, probably working too much. I've got a performance background and I run a business as well, so I was doing a lot within my work, and also I was very fit and very healthy with everything I was doing outside of work. I was running, I was swimming, I was going to the gym quite often, had a personal trainer, so I was working out loads. So, in my head at the time, I was like, I'm fit, I'm healthy. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm looking after my body. Mm-hmm. And I'd never been to a hospital or a doctor pretty much in my life.
So when you saw the lump, what did you think it was?
I did the whole, I'm fine. There's something appearing on my arm. It's just muscle. Surely it's just muscle. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm fit, I'm healthy. And do you know what? I ignored it. And I ignored it for too long. Luckily, my personal trainer at the time was saying, you need to go to the doctor and get this looked at. I did this whole thing of, no, I don't need a doctor. I don't know why I thought like that. It's very strange. I just sort of got on with things and ignored it. But luckily, by the time I went to see a doctor, they said if you had left it by another couple of weeks or so, then that tumour, once we had the biopsy and everything, it would have spread very quickly. So that was a major shock, and everything stopped. Mm-hmm. Everything I was doing in my life stopped. I had 2 weeks to sort my life out. Sort a lot of things out before I started quite heavy treatment. So I couldn't do any exercise. I had to stop all that. I had to sort my work out because I'm self-employed, so that was another struggle. I had to move flat to be near the hospital because I was in hospital weekly, and sometimes I was admitted for a week at a time for the chemo I was having daily.
So moving on top of everything. And only a 2-week window to.
No, we had I had a 2-week window, and I had family who flew in, and suddenly everything was stopped for family as well, and friends as well. Everyone sort of came by to look after me quite quickly. At the time, it's still a big bubble. I can't really remember this 2-week period. In my head as well, I was like, I've got to keep working. I run a business, so I have to keep doing that. That's all I knew. So everything kind of was a big, massive change for me. Yeah, but moving flat as well. I don't know how I managed to do that, but
it's so much. It's so much.
I just needed somewhere for family to stay, and I did need to be in the hospital because I had to be quite close.
And so, what was your treatment?
I had 14 rounds of chemotherapy every 2 to 3 weeks. I had 5 weeks of radiotherapy as well on top of that. Quite an aggressive treatment, which they did say you're not really going to be able to do a lot. You're going to be quite ill. I wasn't quite prepared on how much it would take over. There were times I was pretty much bedbound a lot as well, in hospital, a lot for treatment. So for me, my treatment, I couldn't really do any exercise, a lot of exercise. Even walking was a struggle at times. So for me, being fit, active, running a high-energy job, performing...
Right. All those things
everything stopped overnight.
Yeah.
Pretty much overnight. And that was tough for me. Really tough.
And Neil, you're nodding. Does that strike a...
Yeah, the toughness of it all and the stress of everything. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
So you were in your early 20s.
Yes, so I was 25. I'm from Scotland originally, but I was working in London running a bar, and I started to get really dizzy. And went to the doctors, and they thought it was an ear infection and gave me some meds and everything, and then I just kept getting more and more dizzy, and I didn't really know what was going on. And then I FaceTimed my mum and dad and was talking about how I had sort of bad balance issues. My speech got quite slurred. I found it hard to sort of I did little tests of myself, so if I closed my eyes and pointed at something on the table, my arm would be like a metre away. So I had really bad sort of coordination and everything. So my mum was actually really worried that I had MS. So she said, right, get yourself home today and we'll get you into the doctors and see what they can find. And they found a brain tumour, which they always seem to grade it in the size of fruits. So mine was the size of a plum, apparently. But I've heard sort of tangerines and things. Luckily, it wasn't a melon, which was good.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah,
How are you feeling about plums now?
I don't mind plums, bananas. But that's a different story. But yeah, and then when they found the tumour, I was sort of rushed through to Aberdeen, where I had my surgery, and it was after they took the tumour out that they realised it was cancerous, and I was told that I'd have to have 6.5 weeks of intensive radiation. Which was awful, really. It was really difficult, especially because it was to my whole cranium and my back as well. So it was a lot of sort of side effects that I wasn't quite expecting. And yeah, and then afterwards I was sort of told, right, that's everything done. You're fine. You're fixed, which I didn't really feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so was that kind of how was that transition for you from going from that very active, really intense treatment to kind of being let loose?
I mean, it was really difficult because I'd been independent since I was 19. So I moved back with my parents and they were looking after me, and I really struggled with that lack of independence. The DWP, the benefits agency, told me that because I was under 26, I was still a child, so I was entitled to less benefits. And therefore I felt even more angry because I was like, I'm not a child. Like, come on, I'm my own person. But yeah, so I had no money and everything. I had to rely on my folks, and I just felt like I'd taken about 1,000 steps backwards. And it was just really tough. And I couldn't do the things I was doing before. I was like a sort of quite a confident person before. I was going out, I was partying a lot, I was living that sort of lifestyle, working 90 hours a week, and that was fine. And now I was like napping all the time and watching TV and just having cups of tea, and I just wanted to like go and have a blowout. But I had a few drinks one night and I was like dying for about 2 days afterwards, so I couldn't do that anymore. So it felt like I'd lost so many things, which I really struggled with. And so quickly as well. Like what Dan was saying, like it was like 2 weeks ago I was this normal guy, and now I'm like like a ghost of myself almost.
And did you guys relate to what Mike was saying with personality changing and the Russian doll, like the different faces that you put to different people in your life? Did you find that there was pressure to keep everything in?
Absolutely. I do feel there was pressure. The kind of person I was, and I have always been very confident, and maybe that's again coming from a performance background. I'm used to maybe not lying, but putting on a front that everything is okay. And I got diagnosed. It was a shock. I was scared. I did feel really lonely. I didn't know anybody who's ever had cancer before. Didn't know anything about it, really. And it never been affected between my friends and family. So I think in my head, straight away, I was like, right, let's worry about every other person around me apart from myself. And that's what I did for a really long time. I did notice quite quickly, and overnight, again, I changed. Like my personality, for me, had changed because I was maybe faking it a bit around other people. And I really was concerned about my family a lot. So, and even to this day, I think even my family and friends said there wasn't one point through all my treatment and afterwards that I complained. I didn't even moan. Nothing. And I'm looking back and thinking, wow, really? I must have really just sort of kept going, I'm fine. Bottle all this in. I'm fine. I'm just getting on with it. But the problem with doing that is you do get a delayed reaction, which I did have. So 6 months after treatment, it was actually since experiencing Shine, going on the Great Escape, that I had some delayed trauma. And I was encouraged to go and start seeking therapy. And I did, and the hospital I was transferred straight to having some therapy sessions, which then that's when I realised, maybe I'm not fine. And we started talking about how my whole experience with cancer and how I'd kept a lot of things to myself was actually quite normal, which I found. A lot of people did do. But afterwards, there was a delayed trauma. So I was getting trauma counselling. That's what they were sort of calling it. Because there was a period after I had treatment, I didn't talk about cancer, and I was like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. I just stopped talking about it, avoided the subject. I'd even walk away from situations because I knew something was going to be brought up. And it got to the point when people said, they want to know how I am. Like, how are you now? And then rather than go, do you know what? I'm not sleeping really well. I'm having a few panic attacks. My anxiety is just is creeping up on me, and that's new for me, anxiety problems. But I didn't say anything like that. I was like, yeah, I'm fine. Then I changed the subject.
Right.
So the therapy I started having actually got me used to talking about it again. Hence why coming today is a big thing, because I'm happy to talk about my emotions, talk about how I'm dealing with it, and opening up again, because it's okay to talk about cancer. It shouldn't be a taboo subject. Mental health should not be a taboo subject.
Do you think there's more pressure on men not to talk?
Do you know, I think there is not to talk, and I think maybe just even I've just been that kind of person. Maybe I don't know if it's because I'm a guy that I just don't open up to everyone about my emotions. Mm-hmm. I do with my friends. I don't hold back, but there has been times that I have. I'm like, why am I being like that? Which is, it's changed now that I've started realising that, I need to. If somebody, like for example, I meet a lot of people through my job. I meet a lot of people through my swimming team, and if I disappeared for a couple of years, some people go, well, where have you been? Mm-hmm. Rather than just go, oh, we've just been away. Now I've started saying, I had cancer treatment. And, the response now isn't, oh my God, what? Cancer? It's, oh, then someone, you almost could relate to it in some other experience in their life. Or maybe they're waiting for you to say something like that because maybe they have experienced cancer, or someone in their family, or just a big thing in their life. So
it's quite interesting kind of how isolated you can feel when you are kind of having these different fronts and this sense of holding things in. But like you said, even with people that aren't super close to you, actually, when you do open up, it ends up being a point of connection.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing saying that you've had cancer treatment. It may be a shock to some people, but I've realised it really isn't. It should be something that we shouldn't just hide away. I've had cancer treatment, and then I had to deal with the fact that I had cancer.
Yeah.
So it's okay to say that to somebody.
And did you experience, Mike talks about anger, did you experience emotions that you didn't have before in terms of like numbness or frustration, or like would you say there was one particular emotion that kind of came through? Well,
for me, I think it was numbness. I didn't have any anger. Or maybe looking back, I don't think I had any anger. I think there maybe was frustration, but the numbness for me, that was overnight. The numbness. Oh my God, what's just happened? And then put on this front. So my acting skills came in instantly. I'm fine. Yeah, I've got cancer. Hey, it's okay. But actually inside,
so it's almost like a protective coating of numbness. Yeah. And what about you, Neil?
I can relate. I had extreme sort of anger. I had these constant dreams, like Mike was saying about dreams. Every single night I'd have dreams about punching things non-stop, and I'd wake up and I'd be scared that I'd broken my hands and my knuckles were all bloody, and realised that I hadn't. And I just had like an overwhelming urge just to I'd be walking down the street and just think, I really hope someone just starts a fight with me or something. I really just hope I could and which is so bizarre because I'm not like an angry person before, but it was like how I was venting things. And I think my sort of growing up in the north of Scotland as well, you're my parents were fantastic, like bringing me up, but I think other influences sort of taught me that you've got to be strong and everything, and you've got to hold things together. So I didn't really understand how to let these emotions out properly, and that it was okay to sort of cry and be upset and everything. So I found that anger was the easiest thing to sort of channel things into, which was really unhealthy. And I ended up, it was about 6 months after the sort of dust settled after treatment, where I was really not well mentally, and I thought, right, this is not good. And so I went to counselling, and it was there that it was interesting that it sort of brought up my earlier life. I'm dyslexic, so in school they didn't pick it up, and I was told I was stupid. I remember sort of an overwhelming feeling of, like, from my teachers and things, of just being useless and worthless. And so I just completely took that on as a persona, and I was just quite self-destructive, drinking a lot and not treating myself very well. And when I became vulnerable after cancer, all of that came out, and I recognised it. And actually going to the counselling and getting some of those issues sorted, and recognising that I wasn't these things that I thought I was, and that I had some sort of some good things that I could offer people, and that, like, I wasn't this person I thought I was, and I could be kind to myself as well. I didn't really know that before. I'd never been told that I have to be nice to myself. I've been told about being nice to other people, but never nice to myself. So learning that was a huge thing for me, and it's actually really benefited me. So I'm, in some ways, it's like better for me now than I was before, really. So yeah.
So it sounds like that this really gave you an opportunity to look at sort of pre-existing ways of thinking and coming up with, like, new pathways for going forward.
Yeah, definitely. It's made me, all in all, become a bit more of a healthier person. Like, I remember one of my teachers in school telling me, "I'm so glad I'm not your dad." And at the time I thought, yeah, whatever. But it was when the dust settled, when I was vulnerable again, that it all came out. And I recognised that, like, one of the most important things is making my parents, but especially my dad, proud of me. So, like, whenever my mum says that to me, I just break down. Because now I can recognise that, like, that's important for me, and it's not a bad thing. Whereas before I was quite happy being, well, as I said it, quite happy being like a fuck up, just a waste of space. And, like, I used to, like, revel in that, which is just incredibly bizarre to think about. And I'm in a lot more of a healthier place now. But that's through seeking help and through going to counselling. And I had counselling at Maggie's, specific counselling for cancer patients. And then I also had a course of CBT therapy, which I found completely changed my perspective. And yeah, I can highly recommend that to anyone, especially if you want to learn a little bit about yourself, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how do you find, this is a question for both of you, how do you find talking to other men in particular? Do you find there's a different way of communicating about cancer?
Going through my whole cancer treatment, everything in the hospital, looking back, I realised I was dealing with mostly, there's female patients I was talking to, there were female nurses, and there were some things I know that I wanted to talk to a guy about, and I didn't notice a lot of that when I was in the hospital. So that I think meeting or talking to some of my male friends, I do kind of open up a bit to them. But yeah, I think there is that kind of side that there are some things that...
The thing is, especially in the demographic of 20s, 30s and 40s, it is a lot more women that are accessing groups and stuff than there are men. And that's why, like, I feel that, you know, there needs to be more spaces for men to talk about some of the effects. And, you know, if doctors, like, talk to you about, you know, dating and libido and changes in those ways, that sometimes is nicer to talk to another man that understands that.
I definitely didn't have that kind of doctor, though, the talking about libido, talking about dating and how you're going to feel afterwards or during. And I do remember trying to look, actually, for forums and things, which I did struggle to find. And I didn't know about Shine, actually, until I finished my treatment, which was still a good time.
Yeah.
or any time to find a
So you
charity.
did find yourself actively sort of looking for
Yes.
resources about that.
Well, I found as well that, because I was a guy, I'd lost my hair, I'd put on 2 stone, I had a whopping big scar on the back of my head, but it was a guy, so it didn't matter that I wouldn't have body confidence issues. I wouldn't, I was a guy, I was fine. And also because I was saying, I'm fine.
Right.
Yeah,
But
always
I
convince
wasn't
yourself
fine.
that you're fine.
My confidence had been shot. Going out on dates now, I felt awful about myself. And so, it was just really tough. But then I felt that I was being looked at because I was... And maybe it was coming from me as well, because I was this strong person that I'll be fine. And there's not all these confidence issues. That's not like a strong man's perspective. And actually just stopping for a minute and saying, yeah, I mean, I get a bit shy sometimes now, and I've struggled to say some things. And my best mate really helped me with that, because I spoke to him and I said, yeah, I'm really struggling with this because I'm going on dates now and I can't say anything nice to anyone. I can chat to someone, but saying you look pretty is just beyond me. So he was a few, and also the Shine Dating After Cancer group, there was a few tips in there which were about just trying to treat every date like a practice date. And so going along and thinking, right, I'm going to just try one little thing here and just say, okay, you've got a nice necklace. And then that's a little goal for me. And I can be like, right, okay, I'm a little bit better now. And then the next time I meet someone, and just practicing a bit. And then that's how I sort of increase my confidence. But definitely from a guy's perspective. And again, with sex, going to some sex sessions and they're handing out lubricant. And I'm like, yeah, that's not my issue. It's so it is because you're a minority. So it is a bit different, but I think also having that space to talk to other guys as well. I enjoy talking to women about things as well. I enjoy going to meetups, and I don't mind if it's just me, the only guy. But sometimes it's nice to know there's other people there, and I think especially when I found Shine, it was that I wasn't alone. It wasn't 100 women and me. It was there was a whole range of ages, of genders, of sexualities, of race. It was normal people. It wasn't just me on my own. So I think that really, really helped.
Yeah, and how did you feel about dating?
Do you know what? It's funny. I'm still actually struggling a little bit with the dating side. When I was looking after my body beforehand, and I enjoyed going to the gym and everything. But then as soon as I had treatment, I again lost all my hair. Put on weight because of the steroids I was having and not doing any exercise and just eating whatever I wanted to eat, really, because I was like, I'm going through cancer treatment, I'll have that pizza. You don't care. So then that completely did knock my confidence. It did sort of change me inside for the whole kind of dating and sex side of things. And I felt really ugly. I looked really ill. I just no one wants to... I couldn't even go out to have a date, even if I did, when I was having treatment, because I was very ill. And it took a while afterwards for me to just feel a bit more confident with my body and how I looked, because I looked so pale through my treatment, and having a massive scar on my arm, just things, that have changed. There were by points when I was having treatment, I look in the mirror and I was like, oh... It's just you really just look at yourself and go, I just look disgusting. Even though your friends and family go, oh no, you're rocking the bald look, you look great.
Yeah.
You're like,
You really
inside,
suit being bald.
oh gosh, I got that all the time.
I look like a bowling ball. I don't suit being bald
didn't
at all.
like it at all.
And I lost some of my beard hair, so I had a Hugh Jackman Wolverine thing going on, and I was like, how on earth am I looking good? People are just...
The only good
talking
thing was
shit.
you didn't have to shave. I didn't shave for a year, so But yeah, afterwards it took a while for me to just feel okay with my body. But still, the dating side, I am talking about this with my therapist. That's what we've been going through. In my head, I'm like, bringing up cancer. You don't have to bring up cancer on a first date, obviously, but it will have to be brought up. Is it going to scare somebody off? Will they worry about my cancer coming back? There's all these things that you worry about with dating. And then the sex side of it, I think it's just getting used to, feeling comfortable in your body again because of the trauma and everything you've been through, the drugs that have been pumped into your body, the prodding, the poking, the surgery. you're quite protective of your body, and I think that's scary to sort of let somebody else be in your comfort zone again.
I think
So
especially
that's
if you're like you see yourself as the sort of macho male role. If you have to swap that, like I can't lie down flat now, and I can't like move about that easily. So certainly in that sort of aspect, I'm not the sort of macho person I was before. I can't just do similar things, so I just have to take things a bit slower and have that conversation with someone, which is quite difficult in the person I was before. But then I think over time as well, and over therapy and things just accepting that is me now, and that it's nothing to be sort of ashamed of, and that I don't have to be that sort of chauvinistic sort of male person. I can be just myself and just happy with myself, and that if someone has a problem with that, they're probably not the right person for me anyway. So yeah.
And there's something about hearing you guys like talking about that, like it really normalizes the experience. I mean, it's rubbish and it's shit, but you know, even knowing that someone else is looking in the mirror and kind of feeling the same way, or kind of thinking of dates as like one increment at a time, like a practice date, like the knowing that your experiences are understood by other people.
And it's really scary going back out to trying to be how you were before, knowing that things have changed in your life now. And I was really confident with dating or meeting people, but then suddenly now, like, going on a date is like, it's actually really terrifying.
I think what helped with me was recognising that a lot of things have changed for the worse, but also some things have changed for the better.
Yeah.
And actually, it's not, at this point in time, I'm not a worse person than I was 3 years ago. There's some difficult things that have happened, and there's some barriers there, and there's some speed bumps that make things a bit more challenging. But overall, there's some things that have been brought into my life that are positive, that I can offer people, that people can see that I've been through this, and I can use my experience to help people. So, like, it's not all negative. I think that's the way I try and view it.
So, using your experience, we're going to have Mike come back into the studio, and we're going to thinking about your. If you were to tell someone who is coming towards the end of treatment a piece of advice, or that you wish that you had known at that point, something that you thought would be useful?
I think I wish that I'd sort of heard that, first of all, that it's okay to not be okay. You don't have to be this positive, smiley person. You don't have to worry. You've gone through cancer treatment. There's a bit of you that you have to look at yourself and help yourself. It's great looking after all these other people, but you have to take a minute to look at yourself. And that if people have told you, I mean, something traumatic has happened to you, so I mean, talking about it with someone and opening up to someone isn't a sign of weakness. And I mean, it's if you broke your arm, you'd fix it. So your head is probably not going to be in the best place, and it might be 6 months later. And just being aware that might happen, and then when it starts to happen, like Mike said, instead of waiting for a breaking point or a crisis or something, when you start to deteriorate, maybe just speak to someone. And it doesn't have to be intense counselling. It can just be going for a walk with your mate and just speaking to them and just being a bit honest and saying, I feel really crappy about this, or this has been really tough. And I mean, from the other side of it as well, if you're wanting to help someone who's been through that, just giving them that time and space and listening to someone. I have a mate Ben, who anytime I tell him anything that's happened, he says, "Oh, that's really shit. That really sucks, man." And I'm like, "Yeah, it does." And then he just lets me talk a little bit, and I'm like, I need that. I don't need someone to tell me I'm brave or inspirational or anything. Yeah. I just want someone to listen and tell me it's rubbish, because that's what it is. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
I think definitely don't walk away. When you finish treatment, think that you're just going to move on and avoid it, which there was a point where I did. I thought, okay, right, I don't want to talk about this anymore, which that's what causes the problems. And I think even if you're not offered, I know they're saying through the NHS you're not instantly offered therapy, I would say ask for it and take it up quite quickly after treatment, just so that you can start balancing out everything. And I think that's what I just left it quite long, and that's what I think definitely talk about it a lot sooner, so Neil was saying.
And what's the worst that's going to happen?
Exactly.
What about you, Mike?
Just supporting what Neil and Dan have just said, really. I think speaking about cancer, your own diagnosis, much earlier on, as opposed to waiting until after treatment's finished. I think it has its benefits. Because cancer's a big deal, and you need to work through it, from the start. Even when you're in treatment, just to sort of sit down with someone and say, right, I'm going through this. This is happening. That's happening, and just trying to process it all. But equally, if you're not feeling the same as you used to, or if you feel that something's not right, you can't put a finger on it, but you're not sure, then don't be afraid to speak up and go and see your GP, or speak to your specialist nurse or your oncologist, and just say, look, something's not right. I can't put a finger on it, but I just thought to tell you, and then hopefully that would then open up the avenues which will stop you from going down the road of the kind of disaster that I personally did. But that's the kind of advice for me. Don't give up, and don't be afraid to seek advice.
Well, thank you to all of you for sharing that, and for coming in and for chatting. And yes. And if you feel like you want to reach out, you can go to shinecancersupport.org. There's loads of things on there, aren't there? There's the Shine Camp, there's private Facebook groups, we've got Twitter, blogs, vlogs, we've got all the things.
You get WhatsApp groups now when you go on meetups, you can connect to so many people.
All the things. So go on there and, see what others are saying, have a reach out. There's loads and loads of support out there. And so just before we say goodbye, I just want to do a massive shout out to Radio Facilities for being such awesome support for our podcast. Until next time, see you later. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.